Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. My name is Damien. My marriage to Cassandra fell apart when our twin daughters, Natalia and Lily, were still toddlers. They had just turned 2, and Cassandra and I had been married for 4 years. Those 4 years felt much longer than they were, drawn out by endless arguments, deep-rooted differences, and the growing realization that maybe our union had been a mistake neither of us wanted to acknowledge. The divorce started off ugly, full of resentment and accusations, but eventually we managed to find some civility for the sake of our girls. Still, the damage was already done. Cassandra and I could no longer stand to be around each other. After months of battling it out in court, we agreed on shared custody. I'd have the twins every other weekend and on alternating holidays. It wasn't ideal, but at least it meant I'd get to see them regularly. At that time, I had just started my own landscaping business. I poured everything into it, my energy, time, and heart, just trying to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy, but it gave me something to focus on besides the silence of an empty home. Cassandra worked as a nurse. Her schedule was unpredictable, which sometimes meant I'd have the girls for longer than planned. I didn't mind at all. In fact, those moments were what I lived for. I'd take them to the park, bake cookies with them, or simply cuddle them until they fell asleep. Every laugh, every hug reminded me that despite everything, I hadn't lost everything. But Cassandra had a way of turning even small things into battles. Whenever I couldn't take the girls an extra day because of work, she'd accuse me of being unreliable. Whenever I suggested switching weekends, she'd call me selfish. It felt like no matter what I did, it was never enough. Our communication broke down completely. We only spoke through short, clipped text messages about pickup times or the girls' needs. I tried to stay calm for my daughter's sake, but inside I was exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained from walking on eggshells. Then one evening, things got worse. Cassandra called me out of the blue, her voice trembling. She told me she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. My heart dropped. For all the anger and bitterness between us, I didn't want anything bad to happen to her. She was still the mother of my children. Without hesitation, I told her I'd help however I could. I rearranged my work schedule so I could take the twins more often, sometimes for weeks at a time when she was too weak from treatment. I drove her to appointments, picked up her medication, and even helped with groceries when she couldn't manage. I did it all without complaint, not because I still love her in a romantic way, but because it felt like the right thing to do, and because deep down a part of me still cared. Watching her struggle broke something inside me. Seeing her hair fall out, seeing the fear in her eyes, it reminded me how fragile life really is. Surprisingly, during those months, something shifted between us. We began to talk again, not about our past, but about practical things, about the kids, about her health. And sometimes, late at night, when I'd drop off food or check in on her, she'd smile faintly and thank me. For a brief moment, it felt like we were no longer enemies. When her treatment ended and she started recovering, she looked healthier and stronger. The girls were thrilled to have their mother back to her usual self. I thought maybe, just maybe, things would finally calm down between us. But I was wrong. A few months later, Cassandra's attitude toward me started to change again. She became cold, distant, and sometimes even hostile. She'd make snide remarks when I came to pick up the twins, or roll her eyes when I tried to talk about their school. I tried to ignore it first, telling myself she was still dealing with the emotional aftermath of her illness. Then came the day I found out she was seeing someone. At first, I didn't mind. She had every right to move on, and I genuinely wanted her to be happy. But what bothered me was how quickly this man, Ethan, started spending time around my daughters. Within weeks, he was picking them up from daycare, attending their school events, and even staying overnight at Cassandra's house. It didn't sit right with me, not because of jealousy, but because I didn't know this man. I didn't know what kind of person he was. When I voiced my concerns, Cassandra snapped at me, saying I was overreacting and needed to respect her life. I bit my tongue for as long as I could, But then Natalia told me she didn't like Mommy's friend. When I asked why, she just shrugged and said he yelled a lot. That was enough for me to confront Cassandra again. But instead of listening, she accused me of trying to sabotage her relationship. From that moment, everything between us became toxic again. The arguments, the accusations, the cold silence. It all came rushing back. But this time, it felt even heavier, like a war we'd both grown too tired to fight. About a week before everything came crashing down, I noticed Cassandra acting strangely. About a week before everything came crashing down, I noticed Cassandra acting differently. Her messages became shorter, her tone sharper. When I went to drop off the twins, she barely spoke to me, barely looked me in the eye. I told myself it was just stress, maybe work, maybe something with Ethan. But deep down, I felt that old, familiar tension returning. That Friday, she called, sounding distant yet oddly calm. She said she needed me to take the girls for the weekend because she had something important to deal with. I agreed without hesitation. I picked up the twins that evening, and everything seemed normal until Sunday afternoon, when I brought them back to Cassandra's house. Something fell off the moment I pulled into the driveway. The curtains were drawn even though it was still bright outside, and her car wasn't in its usual spot. I thought maybe she'd gone out with Ethan. So I texted her, telling her I'd dropped the girls off and would head out, but she didn't reply. A few hours later, I received a message from her, just one line. You don't need to come by next weekend. We'll talk later. No explanation, no warmth, just cold detachment. That week, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The following Friday, I drove to her house anyway. I had this instinct, this uneasy pull that wouldn't let me ignore it. When I arrived, her car was there, but the front door was slightly open. I stepped inside and called out her name. No answer. The twins' toys were scattered in the living room, and there were clothes all over the hallway. My chest tightened. Then I heard muffled voices coming from the bedroom. When I pushed the door open, my world shattered. Cassandra was in bed with Ethan. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, like my mind couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear her gasp when she realized I was standing there. Ethan scrambled to cover himself, and Cassandra started shouting, telling me to get out. But I couldn't move. All those nights I stayed up worrying about her health. The times I took care of her when she was too weak to stand. The way I'd rearranged my entire life to make things easier for her. It all came crashing down like a cruel joke. I finally managed to speak, my voice shaking. After everything I did for you, this? She didn't respond. She just stared at me, guilt flickering in her eyes for a split second before she looked away. I turned around and left, slamming the door behind me, my heart breaking into pieces I didn't know how to gather. That night, I sat in my truck for hours, unable to go home. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I tried to make sense of it all. I wasn't angry, at least not at first. I was numb, completely hollow. But as the numbness faded, anger crept in, not just at her betrayal, but at myself, for caring too much, for believing we could ever find peace again. I stopped answering her messages. For days, she tried to reach me, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that she needed comfort and didn't mean to hurt me. But the damage was done. Then, almost as if life wasn't cruel enough, 2 months later Cassandra called again. Her voice was weak, fragile, like it had been during her first round of treatments. The cancer had returned. This time, I didn't rush to her side. I couldn't. The wound was still too fresh. I cared, yes, but I couldn't bring myself to go through it all again while pretending everything was okay. When she asked if I could take the twins while she went through chemotherapy again, I agreed immediately. The girls were innocent in all this. They didn't deserve to suffer because of what happened between us. For months, I cared for them while Cassandra underwent treatment. I made sure they were loved, safe, and happy, but I kept my distance from her. I dropped the girls off at her sister's house instead of hers, leaving quietly before Cassandra came out to see me. One night, after putting the twins to bed, I sat in the living room staring at an old photo, the four of us smiling in the park, back when things were still good. That's when it hit me how much life can change without warning, how love can turn into resentment, and kindness can be mistaken for weakness. Cassandra survived her second battle with cancer, but she was never the same. Neither was I. We kept things civil for the girls, but the bond we once shared, no matter how fragile, was gone forever. I focused on being the best father I could be, keeping my business growing and my daughters happy. They became my purpose, my anchor, my reason to keep going. Sometimes when I drop them off and catch a glimpse of Cassandra through the window, I still feel that familiar ache in my chest. Not love, not hate, just a quiet sadness for what we lost and for what could never be repaired. In the end, I realize forgiveness isn't always about letting someone back into your life. Sometimes it's just about freeing yourself from the weight of what they did. And that's what I did. I forgave her, not for her, but for me.